I don't know what to say. This is Celia, everybody. That apparently was enough. And so I am. I knew that.
Oh, good morning and happy St. Patrick's Day. I have a brand new song for you again. And this song has a lot of pop culture references in it. You may not get all of them, but you will still understand the song. I'm in a singer-songwriter group, and we write a song every single week. And we get a prompt to write from. And this prompt this last week was to write a song that had a famous person who shares your birthday in the song. So I'm going to let you guess which famous person in this song shares my birthday. It's called Pray. When I feel forsaken, I pray to God. When I feel shaken, I pray to the goddess. When I feel down and blue and I've lost my groove, I get on my knees and I pray to Elvis. Baby, 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 don't be cruel. Love me tender, love me true. Baby, 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 whatever you do, don't you step on my blue suede shoe. When I need to let go, Buddha. When I'm broke, I pray to Lakshmi. When I'm down on my luck and I just can't give a buck, I get on my knees and I pray to Joe Pesci. Baby, baby, what do I amuse you? Mr. Carlin is the one taught me to pray to you. And
It just so happens that my buddy Celia and I were talking, and we were talking about, because this is what you do on a weekend, we were talking about different forms of prayer. Okay, it's what we do on a weekend. And my younger brother, who is not a religious scientist at all, although he really is, was telling me about his version of prayer. And he said he learned his version of prayer from Joe Pesci. And frankly, when he gets into it around money, his prayer is, "You pay me." And it's more of making the demand on the universe. Now, I don't pray that way, except for when I do. There are days that my prayer sounds a lot like that, although I try to be so prayed up I never need to go there anymore. What we teach here in this philosophy is that you are the only person that can figure out for you through trial and error what your spirituality needs to look like, what your spiritual practice needs to include. For some people, it's got to be silent meditation. For other people, it has to be moving meditation. For some people, using their prayer beads and using a mantra, whether it's the Our Father and Hail Mary or, one of the Hindu mantras, that's what has to happen to get them into communion with the divine. And that's okay. We happen to teach certain tools. We teach meditation, we teach visioning, we teach something called spiritual mind treatment, which is our form, of affirmative prayer. That's that thing where you say what you want, not what you don't want. That's how we do it. There's lots of other great tools out there. And today, we're talking about living a spiritual life. So it's important for me to remind you that my spiritual life is going to look different from yours. My experience of the divine is going to be different from yours. Of God or goddess, my favorite forms of prayer. We try to pray like Ernest Holmes, who is the founder of this philosophy, prayed. Here's the problem. He mostly prayed in silence and alone. So we have no idea what he was really saying, or if there were words involved. I happen to be of the belief that once you really hit that communion place, there are no words. You're just in it. Which makes it really hard for me to teach you the steps of being nonverbal. That's okay. What's important is also to check out whether our stated values, the things we want to believe about the world, the things we learned in kindergarten were true of people, and how we act out in the world, what we're actually doing with our time and energy, we need to make sure those match. Now, I grew up, as many of you already know, Irish Catholic. We were like uber Irish Catholic. I don't know if you can mix those two words, but there you go. Both of my mother's brothers are Catholic priests with the Boston Diocese. Each of them have more than 40 years of service. Would I become a priest? No, I'm not allowed. There seems to be something about me that doesn't say priesthood. Believe me, it is not the inability to follow orders. Because if you met my uncles, you would understand that neither one of them is good at that. I once asked one of my uncles about poverty, chastity, and obedience. He goes, I didn't take those vows. We were talking about the obedience part at the time, guys, and how good life was. So sometimes when you get into this life and you think you are living your spiritual life, God decides to throw you a little surprise. And what's in that pot at the end of the rainbow may or may not be gold, or may not look like gold. St. Patrick, who is a 5th century saint, is the patron saint and apostle of Ireland. So growing up, I always heard about him. I didn't hear the real story. I heard that he drove that he used the shamrock to teach the Trinity, and he drove the snakes out of Ireland. Those are both legends. We don't know if they're true. What we do know is that he lived sometime in the 600s, that he was raised Christian as part of kind of like a middle-class upbringing. He was raised Christian by a Romanized Britain, which meant that they were under Roman occupation. When he was 16, he got kidnapped and taken to Ireland as a slave. Now, in my wildest dreams, I cannot imagine being taken prisoner, brought to some place I don't know, and told that, instead of being middle class, I'm going to work with my hands. I'm going to actually have to sweat and stuff like that. He was a shepherd, actually. He had already been Christian when he was taken. He was raised with Christianity. But being in that situation really tested his faith. Did he believe that even when he had been kidnapped and taken far away from home, that God was with him? According to his own diary, he started having dreams that were somewhat prophetic. And on the night he dreamt that his escape boat was ready, he ran away. The boat was there to meet him. He got back over the Irish Sea, or the water in between. That's the Irish Sea. Got back to what is to become England. Now, he didn't get home immediately. It took him a while longer. He got taken captive once again, but he made it. And he goes back to living his beautiful Christian life amongst Christian and not with those heathens. Until he has a dream that says, no, you need to go back to Ireland and tell them about the Christ. Honest to God, if that was in my letter of call, which is my contract with this place, but you know what happens when you say to a calling? We talked about it last week. You get the cosmic 2x4. You reach critical unworkability at some point, and it kind of forces you to go. Now, when I became a minister, I wrote a business plan. I had great plans for my ministry. I was going to run a 5-star resort, retreat center, on thousands of acres, and all I needed was a few $1 million to get it, which I was sure I could pray into being. I was going to allow whoever took care of the buildings in general to make my bed for me every morning. I was going to be eating the same food as the residents, which meant we had to have good food. I discovered something called a pillow menu one year. We had to have those because that's a spiritual thing. I had my plan. I had watched my own ministers go through some rough stuff. And so the one thing I was absolutely positively sure about was that I would never be a pulpit minister. I realized I was a pulpit minister and I cried. I didn't even get the pulpit that I wanted. You guys got stuck with me. Because here's what happened. I thought I was going to a certain place. I didn't get the job. Then I heard about this place, and the only thing I knew about Arizona was Phoenix. And I said, oh, heck no. Because the temperature's the same place as that other word. I got convinced to apply because my name was on the community hall. For those of you who are still questioning it, no, I didn't name it after myself. Sibley Hall is for Bob Sibley, who I never met. I met his wife, Reverend Beverly Sibley, briefly. But it literally had my name on it, so I was like, fine, God, I'll go. But I won't like it. And I was very lucky. I had a psychic tell me, oh, it's all right, you'll only be there for a year or so. Yeah. Coming up on a decade, guys. Yay, us. So I got here, and the wonderful people actually found me in the Phoenix airport. I was so amazed by that. And we started driving up the hill. Now, I had had visions of great big trees and mountains when I saw my space. And all of a sudden, we're going up this hill, and we're going up into the mountains. I'm like, there's mountains in Arizona? Flat. Sand. And then things started turning green. I went, wait, what? And I got up here, and it was love, and it was good, and the rest is history. So that is the luck of the Irish, folks. Let me tell you that the original meaning of the luck of the Irish was not actually all that nice. It meant that Irish people were so stupid and so inept that it took the luck of the Irish for them to get anything good done. They basically stumbled into anything good or intelligent. Back in the days when being an Irishman essentially meant, no, you can't shop here, no, you can't work here, no, you can't live here. But the luck of the Irish basically meant that anything good that happened was kind of like God takes care of fools and animals and Irishmen. We have owned that. We have taken that and decided the luck of the Irish now means something entirely different, right? So if the way you were raised no longer works for you, take a look at it and see what works for you now. There are parts of Catholicism for which I am still deeply, deeply grateful. And I still love them. Come back here at Christmas, you'll see how many candles I light. We only got rid of the incense because people were allergic to it. This place could have been billowing. St. Patrick learned that not everything about the physical world would look the way he wanted it to. Now, this is a man who wrote in his diary about raising the dead. He had these prophetic dreams. He had all of this stuff going on, and his writings, although they're written in grammatically incorrect Latin, because he missed a lot of time in school while a slave, they are compared to Thomas Aquinas's. I think it was Thomas Aquinas. So he probably never expected to be a slave. And once he was a slave, he probably never expected to get back to Britain. And once he got there, he sure as heck didn't expect to go back to Ireland. And I'm sure he didn't expect to be called up on charges by the church and criticized for only wanting that job for the sake of the notoriety and, the pay or whatever it was. To be that, being told that he was in that for his ego. I'm sure that, what he was actually wanting to write was, are they flippin' kidding me? I don't know how you say that in Latin. What makes them think that this job is that good? What he did, and Mother Teresa found this out the hard way too. There were parts of the human side of the Catholic Church that did not work out for them, where they were accused of being egoic, where they were accused of being disobedient and not towing the party line. There were parts of Catholicism that just don't work for me. Like, I'm a minister in a different religion. It doesn't work for the Catholics if I do them both. So it might be that there will come a time when you need to take a good hard look at what you were raised in, what your assumptions are about spirituality. And that's going to be a trip, because you have no idea how many assumptions you're carrying that you don't even know you have. Our topic for this month is be truthful in facts and motives. So as the year is about the prophetic justice principles, this particular month we're talking about when you are out in the world, when you're participating in the world, you need to look at whatever policies, whatever behaviors are going on, and make sure you're being truthful in facts and motives. Has anyone ever been approached by one of those people saying, "Here, sign my petition"? Has anyone ever tried to read the petition before they sign it? Or found out later that what they thought they were signing, the way it was written, it actually does the opposite? I don't sign any of those anymore because I don't know what they say. And I don't have 20 minutes to read it. Or I don't want to give them my 20 minutes to read it. It's more accurate. If we are truthful in our facts and our motives as a country, we will do well. That starts with being truthful in our facts and motives here as a community and as individuals. And sometimes I get the question about, well, how do I know whether it's my ego or the divine talking? I don't know what my motives are. I sometimes find out afterwards when it's too late to clean it up. Anyone ever done that? Emerson talked about it as getting your bloated nothingness out of the way. Get your bloated nothingness out of the way. Well, that was written about 100 years ago. I realized not long ago that I have this conversation with my big S self and my little s self. So some days I have to get my little s out of the way. And I invite you to do that as well. Holmes once wrote, "The universe does not toil, it flows." It does not toil, it flows. Should not each of us then stimulate himself to the act, not of intercession for the greater givingness of God, but for the more complete opening of the channel for the outflow of that which shall eternally inflow? There's a long sentence. Let's read that again. Should not each of us then stimulate himself to the act, not of intercession for the greater givingness of God, but for the more complete opening of the channel, for the outflow of that which shall eternally inflow? What does that mean? What it means is we don't have a God that we go beg for good. We are not slaves to anything except our own thinking. And so as we examine our own thinking and get it out of our own way, the divine will flow very naturally through us and bring us beautifully to that place that we say we want to go. That we say we want to go. Many of us, I have a few issues sometimes when things are going too well. I get a little hinky. I'm a little like, okay, what's the catch? Anyone else? Waiting for the other shoe to drop? The ability to not only be happy, but to remain in our joy is a spiritual practice. Sometimes it takes work to get out of the habit of feeling unworthy or like we're still on the path. We're all seekers. At what point do we admit that we are masters? At what point do we move from student to teacher? At what point do we graduate to our capital S self? Once upon a time, the hero's journey was the major story being told. And at the end of the hero's journey, what does the hero do? They go home. And now they have to live life. Having learned about the great big world and having all of these opportunities to get addicted to adrenaline, now they have to go home. And with this expanded mind, find a way to live a normal life. Because you can't shrink back down. That's the challenge. So that's fair warning. As you do your spiritual practice, as you become more receptive to the flow of the divine, you will find that you may not be able to live by your old rules. You may no longer be able to make everybody happy. That was my calling in life at one point. You may have to set boundaries so that you take care of yourself first and then go aid other people who are perfectly capable of taking care of themselves. And so you're just helping, you're not doing it for them. If that is what your life looks like, mine used to, I highly recommend Codependence Anonymous. I'm not even kidding about that. Coda is for people who can mess up their lives without the help of drugs or alcohol. Because we had no boundaries whatsoever. I was a good little Christian. I wanted to be nailed to everybody's cross. I was even going to I would bring you the wood, for God's sakes. I was a good little martyr. I'm over it. So, as you are trying to find your version of spirituality, as you are living your personal spiritual life, I have a couple of signposts for you that you might want to look out for. First of all, does that life bring you joy? I don't mean happiness. Happiness is an emotional response to something that we're calling good happening out in the world. Joy is an internal state of being that doesn't depend on anything out in the world. To me, it feels quieter, it feels deeper, and it feels a lot more permanent. Joy is being one with the one, no matter what goes on out there. What you might want to do is find something in which you can be in service to something greater. Be in service in some way. And that is a good signpost for your spiritual life. If you're living your spiritual life as fully as you can, it will in some way be making the world a better place. You should also end up liking who you are and who you are becoming. If you find that doing that thing in your life that you think is going to make you spiritual makes you miserable and kvetchy and whiny and unhappy, stop it. Stop! Best thing I was ever taught. You know what's the best thing about beating your head against a wall? It feels so good when you stop. If it's hurting you, don't do it. Take a step back, take a breath. See what that hurt is about. Is it because you're doing something you shouldn't be, or because you're outgrowing something and you've got some growing pains? And this one might surprise you. It should be something you can see yourself getting better at, that you are not necessarily good at first. That even in your joy, you can be uncomfortable because it's a little bit outside of your comfort zone. You're not an expert at this. You might need to join some other people and get some help with this project. You might need to spend some time learning how to do it. And over time, your level of spirituality might change. What it looks like will change. Believe me, my spiritual practice now is nothing like what the nuns taught me as a kid. There are a few things in common, and I'm sure the nuns would be perfectly happy with what I do now. Well, maybe not Sister Victoria. These are the things we do to live our own spiritual lives. These are the things that we do in order to grow as spiritual beings, to open up that channel for good and more good to come in. And it may well surprise you what your prayer sounds like. It sure as heck surprises me to find that setting boundaries and letting other people be upset with me is part of my spiritual practice, because it's none of my business. None of you are allowed to ever be upset with me. We all know this is a rule, right? That is so not the truth. All I ask is that you come into my office and speak to me one-on-one so that we can all practice having difficult conversations. So as I said in the beginning, prayer is part of our spiritual practice, and we do it